not only part of, recording in progress. Our presentation is not only part of Design Week Rhode Island, it's also part of PVD Fest, which due to COVID has sort of been stretched out. So we're glad we're able to be part of both programs. And PVD Fest is produced by the City of Providence through the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism, founding partner First Works, Mayor Lorza, and the Providence City Council. Thank you to the Art and City Life Commission, whose service to the city makes ACT's public art program possible. Dan Wood, did I see you sign in? Maybe you did. Dan Wood is officially a city commissioner, so you can ask him all of your city commission questions. Thank you to our PVD Fest Ideas curatorial partners at the Rhode Island Historical Society, the Rhode Island Council on the Humanities, and the Providence Public Library. Jordan Goffin, I think I saw you in here, so I'll make sure that I direct all library curatorial, I'm saying all the wrong words, questions directly to Jordan, ask him lots of library questions. The city has also provided 2 great slides from Kay Funmi Ilero, about the city's land acknowledgement. So I'm going to hide all of you to read through these. We acknowledge that we are occupying the land stewarded by the first people who inhabited this area, the Narragansett, the people of the Little Point, or people of the points and bays, and the Wampanoag, the people of the First Light, or the people of the East. We recognize and honor the living legacies of Indigenous people across what we now call Providence for their cultural stewardship and for teaching those who arrived at this land, by choice and by force, to consider our lifetime within the context of the next 7 generations. So with that, we're going to hop into our artist presentations, and I'll ask you all to stay muted. There will be a Q&A session later, so hold on to all of your burning questions. So I'm going to pass off to Allie.
Hey. Hi, friends. How are you? Let's go to the next slide. So just to be clear, I'm Ally Thatcher. I'm not Fallen Cargo. I just work for them, because every so often somebody be like, "You're Fallen Cargo," and it's just like, that's not me. But Fallen Cargo is an art and design practice that I started that is centered around protecting and preserving Black culture. Each piece is designed to confront the whitewashing of culture and history. So there's a singular history taught to us about the founding of this country. That's not inclusive, and neither is it completely accurate. So I believe that equality cannot be obtained if we are not educating Americans on why and how this country exists. Next slide. So before getting into Fallen Cargo work, I wanted to just show a few pieces that I did before launching Fallen Cargo. So this first piece is a whitewashing series, which were a series of posters of movies that had whitewashed casting. And then at the top right is a Das Racist game board that I designed as a student at the Hartford Art School. I was studying graphic design, and one of our assignments was to create a board game. And so I wanted to create a satirical board game that would evoke a conversation about racism. And then on this bottom right, for Black Lives Matter campaign logos that I created during the building up to the 2016 election, I wanted to create presidential logos of the Black people that were killed by law enforcement. And so these 3 pieces sort of put everything together to create, in the next slide, to create this first piece, which I launched Fallen Cargo with. This is the Kk Kardashian shirt. And this piece is all about the way that, like, white public figures sort of, they exploit Black culture. They use our likeness of like Black womanhood, but still perpetuate white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism. And I tend to make work that's quietly loud, and that's what I love about this shirt. So let's go to the next slide. And so in continuation with more work about whitewashing and unearthing our history, I started this project called the War on Drugs Revise, where I collaborated with a grassroots nonprofit organization called Massachusetts Recreational Consumer Council. I tend to work with them a lot and do a lot of work about examining drug culture and its evolution from the 1980s to present. The war on drugs had such a negative impact on Black and Brown communities, and there's still a lot of people in prison for nonviolent drug offenses related to cannabis. Yet a lot of white entrepreneurs are making millions of dollars off of this industry. And so the work that I do with MRCC is all around decolonizing weed, restoring our communities, and abolition. Oh. And then these next couple pieces, so this piece on the left is called Tignon Lawless, and it's based on Tignon Law of 1786, which was a law that enforced any woman of African descent to conceal their hair. Now, the reason why this law was set into place was because white women felt threatened by the fact that these women of color were attracting white male suitors. And so the colonial governor at the time in Louisiana set this law into place. And what I love about this history is the fact that these women of color decided that we're going to like have the flyest head wraps, and we're going to like use different fabrics and beads and different head wrap styles that still exist in fashion today, especially in Black culture. And so I took a photograph of my mom's hair and put it on a silk head wrap, because I felt like that was just like, I love that idea of the fact that Black people have always been rebelling against white supremacy. And I feel like that's such an important history that today's generation need to understand. It's like we've always been fighting. And I wanted to use that same image for a photo book that I developed called I Love Us, which is a collection of portraits that I had taken over the course of 3 years of Black and brown people like smiling and experiencing joy and existing within their culture and embracing their culture. And I think just as much as we need to unearth the history and our trauma, we also need to document our history as it's happening. And so this book was designed to be an artifact that I would leave behind for future generations. And so like that kind of puts together all of the main pieces that I like to do and the type of work and subject matter that I play around with Falling Cargo. So yeah, I will hand this off to Jacques if he's in the chat right now, if he's ready to present. Thank you guys.
Yeah, Jacques. I am Jacques. Some people say I'm a master printer, but I'm sort of like a journeyman master printer, but I like to say I'm just somebody that just loves to print. You know, I was fortunate to grow up in a print shop. So, you know, I didn't have to pay to go to RISD or Brown or any one of those schools to get an education in printmaking. I grew up in that. And, you know, my dad was a writer. He wrote a lot of books on philosophy, also the teachings of Masons. He was a Mason who traveled basically the world, but he also was a FIFA referee for FIFA World Cup type of thing. So he traveled all over the world doing that also, but he was a writer. And if we wanted to eat, we had to print and buying books. So like I said, I didn't have to pay for anything. But to talk about my work, I was doing a lot of etchings and a lot of letterpress, but then I gave it a break and started delving into historical figures and things like that. One of the things that I've been working on is, you know, I make these prints with little quirky little sayings on them. Some prints I make with that can uplift people and things like that. You know, this is a print I did. I was just sitting around and everything, and you know, I used to be a drinker and I stopped drinking and everything. And you know, I was sitting around and I was playing with type and type high and came up with this print and everything, because I do love type, especially wood type, and it was just my way of saying type gets me high, you know, because I get a joy out of printing, especially letterpress printing. I love playing with layers. You know, excuse me with the but this is another print I just recently did. Change is not change until it is changed. And I've done a lot of changing in my life since I stopped drinking. And in the background in this print, I kind of played a little joke where I found this old block that has all kinds of different changes on the background. It says 2 cents, 3 cents, 5 cents, and things like that. And it was just a little quirky way of, if you look in the background, it just, you know, if you want to come by the shop, come see a print like that. But I make prints like these with sayings on them, try to uplift people here and there, you know, with some of my prints. But one of my favorite works that I did is I curated a show called Good Morning Revolution. And this was one of the prints that was in there, Ella Baker. And the reason I started making these prints, because I wanted to highlight women from the lesser known women from the diaspora, like Ella Baker, who mentored a lot of big names. When the civil rights was happening, it was Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, you know, it was mainly male dominated, but in the background, we had Ella Baker. Ella Baker mentored people like Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Rosa Parks. She was behind a lot of these people in New York. And, you know, and it was my way of highlighting her and a few other women from the diaspora. You know, at first the show started out, it was gonna be about Langston Hughes I was gonna do, but then I started thinking about my mother, you know, and it was kind of my way of paying homage to the women in my life, you know, especially my mother, because she had just passed away around that time. And, you know, so I had to throw Langston Hughes in there. And the whole concept of the show, where I had 6 different artists, and I gave them the task of picking 2 different historical figures, and they were to pick 2 quotes that pertain to what's going on today. And I love Langston Hughes, and I got the name of the show from this quote that's in one of his poems, Good Morning Revolution. And I'm gonna pal around this morning, you know. So it was a good show. And, you know, there's some other names that was in there. Ida B. Wells, you know, short in height, but tall in stature in terms of what she did for the human rights. You know, but she was also persecuted, where she had to move from different states because she was always threatened. But she was a tall figure. Another woman, you know, that wasn't talked about, but now she's really being talked about. Actually, they're talking about a little mini movie about her, I think, now. But yeah, these women were behind a lot of these men that were doing these things, and they were left in the background because, you know, civil rights was not that it was a bad thing that they were dominated by men, but these women were in the background, you know. So that's why we should have more women making some of these decisions nowadays. But I love this show. It was, and another reason I did this show, I had made a print of Fannie Lou Hamer in a workshop. And this guy must have been about 35 years old. He came through and he wanted a print of Fannie Lou Hamer. And I asked him, do you know who she is? And he said, no. So I could not give him a print. I told him, I can't give you a print, man. I'd be doing you a disservice by giving you a print. So I told him, we have this thing called Google now. if you go home and you Google Fannie Lou Hamer, you read up on her and you come back, I'll give you 2 prints. Which he did. He came back and I did give him 2 prints and another print to go with it because it was a disservice. But you know, it's my way of highlighting these women that were lesser known. You know, people like now we have Kamala Harris in the White House. You know, we got Shirley Chisholm, first African American woman to run for president. You know, yeah, and to me, you know, there's not much more I can say about these women, you know, but I'm gonna continue to highlight these women. You know, I have a couple other projects in the back burner right now that I'm gonna be coming out with. One of them is about Haiti, where I'm from. I was born in Haiti, came to the States when I was 6 years old. So I have this project that I'm going to be doing. It's about Haitian history and American history, how the two are intertwined. Another thing that's not being taught in schools is that kind of history about Haiti. And, you know, a lot of people don't know that the Louisiana Purchase would not have happened if it weren't for the Haitian Revolution. And that's another project that I'm working on. And I got a project that's coming on next year in February. It's about George Stinney Jr. George Stinney Jr. is the youngest African American to get the electric chair. He was only 14 years old. He was convicted of murdering 2 white girls in the South. And he just recently took him 10 minutes to convict him. It took 7 years to exonerate him. He just recently in 2014 got exonerated for the murder. So I'm gonna be doing a show about that. But I love playing with images and text, putting text to an image to tell a story about the person. And so these prints are offset letterpress prints that I do. And it's an old school form of printing, you know, that is becoming very popular in the greeting card world, letterpress printing, you know, so. But yeah, that's what I'm up to, you know, and I teach classes in this kind of stuff. You know, I've known Lois for a long time, my cohort for about good 10 years or so, maybe. You know, now Allie's a new cohort in this fight, but, you know, I've never really wanted to be an activist. But I don't know, people say you don't know how to separate the activist from the artist or anything like that. But, you know, it's just my way of educating people, because I know, for instance, education, I was affected by education when I first moved here to the state. I was actually held back a grade because I didn't know the English language really well. And then as the years went by, they actually I skipped 8th grade and went straight to 9th grade because of that, what they did, because I started catching up to things and everything. So I understood what that language barrier is like when you come to the States and trying to get yourself through education system and all that. So yeah, so that's about it about me. Look
Thanks,
forward
Jacques. And everyone, remember, we're gonna have a Q&A session too, because I have got a bunch of questions also that I'm just excited this panel came together so I could hang out with Allie and Jacques and all of you. I'm going to quickly go through a few slides and introduce a little bit of my work. I think you're sensing a theme coming together through all of us, which is how Micah Salkind from Arts, Culture, Tourism kind of put us together. So as Jacques said, I've been in Providence for quite a while, maybe 15 years now. So I studied traditional printmaking at RISD and decided that Providence was a really good distance away from my family in Salt Lake City. So I decided to stay. And I met Jacques at AS220 because it's, as somebody graduating from a facility like RISD that has a lot of printmaking that's totally open, finding those other spaces in the community can be tricky. So I wasn't making a lot of text-based work when I was at RISD and started working at DWRI Letterpress about a year after I graduated. And I've been there for about 10 years now. And we work with really only text there and some images, but it's really made me more confident as an artist to be able to use text and particularly the medium of the poster. So I wanted to start by showing these two posters that we did for the city of Providence announcing the plastic bag ban. And it was a great way to, set a poster that was being used around the city, but also to invite members of the community in to make these posters as well. And I think that's one thing about printmaking and the power of the multiple that's so appealing to me is that, it is a form of commercial printing. So it really should be open to more people, which I think is something that traditional printmaking isn't. And I wanted to talk about a project that for me has been a personal project in Rhode Island, and that's to get the state to finally rename Victory Day or Victory Over Japan Day. So starting a few years back, I made some posters with suggestions of other things to call the day. And I think when Allie mentioned in their work that work is quietly loud, I really like that idea as a concept because I think a lot of my work is meant to sort of start a conversation and not hit people directly over the head with something. So I thought Quahog Day was pretty good, Lobster Roll Day. And last year I elevated the project a little bit by turning the poster into a hashtag and then hiring a banner towing plane to carry the message across Rhode Island beaches. So for me, figuring out how to take a concept that I'd been working with in print and scaling it up was a really interesting thing to figure out and also to finance, which as an artist is tricky in terms of grant writing or funding and all of those fun things. Or I should just keep buying lottery tickets so that I can finally buy a penny smasher, which is always on my list of things. In my kind of artist statement, I always talk about referencing historical materials for my prints. And my paternal grandmother was incarcerated in a camp in Poston, Arizona during World War II. And so this is a print that is based on government posters announcing internment. So this is what the posters look like. So I've really just taken the word Japanese out. And so these prints were created in 2017. And so I liked leaving that space out because then it allowed people to come with their own perspective of what was missing. And again, to start that conversation. So I think as Jacques mentioned, activism wasn't really what I started out with, but getting people to engage in a conversation with me is really the point of a lot of my current work. And as an artist, it's always scary to share personal things. And I changed the slide as though I was going to say something very poignant about this slide that I forgot that I put in here. But really, it's about sharing language and sharing voice and being able to share that in the printed word is something that I really appreciate and really value. And I think that's why all three of us have come together today. Because our work is somewhat similar in the topics that we're addressing and the media that we're addressing it in. So I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to open it up to Q&A. So we have some questions we can ask each other if folks are feeling shy or if anybody wants to pop in with a question. I think maybe I'll hop in. Okay, so I'm going to ask the first question, Allie and Jacques. How does the medium you work in define how you design? And Allie, I think I was thinking of you in particular for this one because you make a lot of soft goods and things that aren't paper.
Yeah, I feel like graphic design is my medium, and that allows me to be a little bit more prolific with the work that I do and be able to create work instantaneously and apply it to different formats. A lot of my friends who are like in the fine arts realm, like they need a studio space to create. And for me, I can just design on my computer in my room. And like, it's a lot easier to actualize it when I have Illustrator or Photoshop. So I feel like that's how like graphic design influences how I create work.
Oh, for me, I'm not a designer, so I've never been a designer. I grew up on copy. You know, people say copy paste, but we actually physically made copies and then we paste them to where we wanted to back in the day. Because the stuff I do and work with is really old school. So all the text and stuff I make and use is all about, for me, it's all about layering. And some of the prints I do with images and all that, I try to keep the text as short and to the point as I can, not make it a long thing, so it doesn't take away a lot from the image, so they both work together and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not a designer by trade. I just love playing with type and things like that. You can see in my background here, thank you.
And I'll say too, to kind of parrot on what Jacques said, I also like to think short things too, because as somebody who also works in type, sometimes you're missing a letter, or like by the time you're setting type, 2 words in, 3 words in, I'm not going to go back and change something. So
yeah, and I get people like Dan loves my prints and stuff like that. He'll reach out to me, hey, you got a typo in there, right? I'm like, oh God, gotta go back and fix that.
I am going to pass to Martha, who has a question. Martha, feel free to type into the chat or unmute.
Okay, I unmuted and I'll put my hand down. All right. I really loved seeing everyone's work. And another question I had, and something I really have admired about all of you, but Providence in general, is how you get your posters out in public space. And I know I've seen Lois's and Jacques a little bit, like particularly the summer of 2020. I remember there were tables and people were just giving out posters at demonstrations, and I thought that was really inspiring. So I wondered if any of you had thoughts about, you do beautiful work, how do you get it out to the public and into public space?
Martha, that is a great question. And I think for me, I'm lucky in that I can usually say, hey, I have posters at DWRI Letterpress, please come pick them up. But also, if one of us is going to a march, it's easy to walk with a stack of posters. And then by the time you've made it to the start of the march, the posters are gone, which is great. And then also I've realized I can hire other artist friends to hang up posters for me, because I always forget how long postering takes. So for me, that's always a really worthwhile investment.
For me, I'm part of a great community, this AS220 community that I'm in. I tend to, I make with the offset. I'm lucky enough to have the offset where I can make multiples of what I make, sometimes I give a lot of my posters away, and I put them in different places for people to see, just to get the message out there. 2020, that was a collective when we had tables all over the place. That was a collective that we had put together, a group of us, and we were just giving out the posters. We wasn't asking for anything. We were just asking for donation in order to keep doing what we do. And things like that is like, because paper costs money, for AS220 ink. I was fortunate with people that I work with and the relationships that I've sort of like cultivated with people, where a person that I helped out gave us like a good $30,000 worth of ink. So we don't have to buy ink. We just have to buy paper. So we just ask people for donation, in order for us to keep doing what we do.
I'm trying to think if this question applies to me, because I use a completely different like channel to show my work outside of just like wheat pasting and posters. Like the t-shirt is my poster format to me. So it's like being able to sell it on my website and make it accessible to a very specific audience, because I'm very precious about where I put my work. Because with satire, it's like some people are going to get it and some people aren't going to get it and weaponize it. And so I tend to be a little bit more precious about where I'm displaying my work.
Thanks, Allie. Thanks, Martha. I've got a question from Willow. How do you maintain your practice on a daily / weekly / monthly level? What is your creative rhythm when formulating ideas?
Let me think. I could kind of start with that as like, I used to treat creating and making almost like a sport in a lot of ways, where it's like I come from an athletic background, so it's like I have to practice at something every day, and I've done that enough with different mediums and different formats to the point where I've naturally gained a schedule or like a regimen on what I'm creating. And then I also like have to take time from not creating at all and just I think like there's a lot of holding yourself accountable, but there's also an aspect of like you got to be kind with yourself and your creative energy. So I find myself trying to figure out that balance of like, I'm going to work on this specific thing for how many months. And then I might, when I feel like I need to step back, I'll step back.
That's a great answer. I think that I always forget about that downtime, which is usually like, I can jam one more thing in here. And then I'm like, I got to go to sleep for like many hours for this weekend. I think in terms of my practice, because I'm working at a commercial space every day, I'm still pretty adjacent to the process. But for me, I wish that I had more of a creative rhythm. It's usually more of like oh shit, I have to hang this show up next week and I've got to crank 2 other things in. So I have a little well of ideas that are I will pull from, but it's a little trickier to think about long-term ideas for me, or bigger ideas, partly because it's how do I have the time to get there or the financing to get there. So I'm going to pass to Jacques.
I don't know, for me, I'm sort of like an on the cuff type of artist. Like if it comes to me, I have to do it right then and there. I don't want to forget it. And a lot of the stuff that I do is just like in the moment. It's like the idea comes to me, I'm doing it right then and there. I'm gonna find paper and I'm gonna put that idea to paper and print. And that's it. A lot of my work, I can't sit there and map out a project like that, because like in my mind, I see the colors and I see how I want it, how I want to arrange it, how I want to put it, and I do it right then and there because I'm afraid of forgetting it. Like my dad used to tell me all the time, if you have an idea, write it down. And I guess that's the writer in him, and it's funny, I make these blank sketchbooks and I never use them. I just go with whatever idea is in my head. If I have paper around, I'm gonna print it on whatever paper I find, or I'll go get paper. So it's my ideas, or when they come, I print them.
Okay, I've got a question from Kath. Hi, Kath. How does Providence influence your work? Living here, the politics of here, geography of here, however you want to answer that.
So like, I'm not from Providence. I've just worked here for so many years. Like I started my career here in like 2015. but I've worked in more of like the events curation space, like with Stay Silent, PVD, and House Party Vibes. I've also did some work with AIGA Rhode Island. And so being in those spaces has taught me a lot about the community. And when I started working with AIGA, I was only getting like one layer of Providence. And I realized that that layer was only like the RISD, like people who are sort of implants to the city. And then once I got into the Stay Silent space, I realized like, oh no, these are people who are born and raised here. And that gave me a much better understanding of Providence and its diversity and its culture. And so I feel like my experience with Stay Silent has influenced a lot of my understanding of the city and the work that I do now. And just like having an appreciation for our culture and making sure that we're always creating spaces for our culture to like be safe and exist and thrive. And so I just carry that with me through all different projects that I do, even if it's a project that I'm not doing in Providence.
Oh man, for me, I've always worked in the commercial industry when it comes to printing. You know, like I said, my dad had his own print shop, you know, but my dad his print shop wasn't printing for other people, but my oldest brother had his own print shop. And I worked for several commercial shops, big shops, worked for a really big greeting card company before I moved here to Rhode Island. And then someone put my name out there for a graphic company that was here in Rhode Island. And you know, they asked me for my portfolio and I sent it to them. And they hired me and I moved to Rhode Island. And it was great working for them, kind of stressful, but it was good money. And but the market crashed in like 2007 or 8, and they couldn't afford to pay me what I was making. And you know, and I'd just rather take the unemployment because the unemployment was more than what my pay cut was going to be. So I was in between things, either move back to Connecticut or go to school, something like that. And I ran into, I forgot what's his name, that works in special collections, but he's in Hartford, Connecticut. And he introduced me to Morgan and Arlie, who had started this AS20 print shop. And I was like, whoa, I got a bunch of this stuff back home and da-da-da-da. And I ended up just fitting right in, you know. It was just like me finding my little kid in me, you know, because me and my oldest brother, when downtime when we wasn't printing for my father, we would play with stuff on the letterpress using different textures and stuff like that. So, you know, it was kind of like, you know, hey, I'm not going back to Connecticut. I like this community print shop, letterpress, everything like that. You know, I can play around like I used to and everything. And I've been here ever since, you know, and just kind of fell into everything else, what everybody else was doing, you know. We used to say, if you see something, say something. And we started making, I forgot who it was that started that, but then we just started making prints. If we didn't like something or we had something to say about it, we just started saying, and that took off. And we're still doing it to this day, you know. I'm really glad I stayed in Rhode Island. I get to do something I really love to do, you know.
I think for me, Providence is always such a visual town. So I think RISD does have a big influence on that in the music community too. There are always great posters around. And I think for me, going through school and wanting to get into more commercial or more mass appeal printing, you know, that the benchmark of getting your poster stolen before the event was always something that I was trying to go for. So I think that really shaped my move into that media. And I think Providence too, the arts community here is really wide and diverse in background. So it's easy to be able to say, hey, I've got an idea. Oh, I bet I know somebody in town who might have already tried this or maybe knows more about it than I do. And so it's easy to find that connection in Providence where, you know, that's like the one really good time that the town is so small where you're like, not like, oh, I've been on a date with this person, but they went on a date with that person. It's more like, oh no, I've got a person who used to work here. And so then can get me another connection here. So the connection is important to me. And then of course for me, the politics do matter. And it's interesting to figure out the next step of having an idea that is politically motivated, but actually then getting it to the next hurdle of making any actual legislative change, which seems interesting. I am going to ask a question from Sophia. Do you think that people have assigned to you the role of activist just because you are a person of color? How have you reacted to that particular title? Has it stopped you from doing or saying certain things or having fun with the art you are making? I think that's a great question. Someone also called me an artivist last week, which I was totally confused by. And I think for me, it's always the art first and then kind of the role of activism after. So they are still somewhat different. And I think maybe you are onto something with if that role has been assigned because I am a person of color speaking about this one very specific part of our history that perhaps people think that I have more ownership to talk about and more ownership over that aspect. I don't think it stops me from doing or saying certain things, but I don't know, ask me in a year or two when I've made something really weird or I'm sure I'll walk into that at some point, but it hasn't affected me. So I'll pass to Allie and Jacque.
I'm constantly grappling with that question of like, I stray very far away from the title of activist, but I also understand that my work functions as that. So people from the outside looking in are like, yeah, you're definitely an activist. But for me, I'm just like, I'm a Black woman that just sees shit for what it is and likes to call it out because it's cathartic for me. You know what I mean? And I don't know, but I also am I'm very because I work in satire a lot, I'm very calculated about what I do and who I present the work to, because it's like there's so much danger with it that I have to protect myself. And so yes, there are designs that I keep in my hard drive, or there are certain things that I have to sit with for a couple years. And it's like doing a large equation, and then for a year, I'll do that equation over and over and over again to make sure that I'm getting it right, because you have to be socially responsible. I'm like, I take it very seriously to make sure that my message is being direct and clear, because it's like, I can't be irresponsible or lazy when this work is representing a marginalized community of people. And then on the other side, what's tough about that label of activist is like, yeah, a lot of Black artists and creatives get labeled as that because we are Black. But at the same time, it's like, if we are not talking about these things, then it's just like, well, you're not really, it makes it hard for Black people to connect to the work that you do. I speak about this a lot in terms of like criticisms that people have of Virgil Abloh, right? Like, yeah, he's a Black man existing in a white industry, but it's not radical enough for some people. But it's like, he should have the space to just make work that is, rather than having to make work that's attached to his Blackness. So it's a really hard thing to figure out. I just, again, stay rooted in like, if I just have something to say that affects my life, I'm gonna just say it.
I mean, I don't really have a hard. I mean, like that label for me is not something, you know, because that label is coming from someone else, right? The way I feel about it, when art, is your own personal feeling. You know what I mean? Like when I make things, it's because I feel a certain way. And I always say, no one tells your story better than you do, right? You know, if it happens to fall in that category of activism, then it does, but it's still my story. You know, when you know, like when that happened to George Floyd, you know, growing up, you know, growing up Haitian, and then, you know, living in predominantly white neighborhood. So for me, I got it on both sides. I was getting it from all sides, right? But it's all about who you are to me. It's like, I can't take what someone tries to think I am. I mean, I can only tell you this, my story, who I am, where I come from, why I do what I do. You know, it's all about feeling. You know, said no one can tell my story better than me. You know, so that's how I see it.
Okay, I have a question from Aya and Liam, who I see over in the top of my screen. Thank you for your work and sharing it with us here. It's so exciting to see the three of you doing this talk together and workshop later. How do you come together? How have the three of you influenced each other? That's a good question.
Is it Lois? We met through AIGA first, I feel like.
I don't remember. This is the Providence thing also, where it's like, oh, I've known you forever. I don't know.
It's like, because we see each other in so many different places, but it was probably like AIGA or something. And then I met Jacques this summer. Like we met on Zoom to organize this. And then we have a mutual friend, Brian, who like, he got us, we were just like in the studio and we were just talking shop, and it was such an enlightening conversation, especially after being in quarantine for so many months. You know, it was just like finally good to talk to people and not just engage in these conversations on social media. Yeah. Because there's a lot of performative shit going on, and it's just like, no, we need to actually be talking face to face and having nuanced conversations. So that's how Jacques and I connected.
Yeah. And it was a good connection, you know, it was a little impromptu, sort of like, hey, I do this. Here, grab a print. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was a great conversation. You know what I mean? I love conversation. I mean, like you said, after all of this time not being around people, and to be able to meet people and talk to people and to be able to hold a conversation, you know, not having to push a button or mute or whatever and everything, but to have a conversation. It was very enlightening, and, you know, and I'm glad we met, you know, because I didn't even know who Allie was until she showed up in the shop. And it was like, hey, yeah, we're gonna be talking about stuff together. Yeah, you know, but it's awesome. Now I say whenever you make a new friend, it's a good day, you know, so. Absolutely. You know, but me and Lois go way back. We go way back to the, you know, like when me and Lois started hanging out and talking, you know, I think we went down the street to grab a hot dog, right?
Yeah, there was a really good hot dog vendor in Kennedy Plaza.
Yeah, he's not there anymore, but
I'm sure that hot dog from 10 years ago is still with me though.
But me and Lois used to have fun, you know. I mean, like Lois took the offset class, you know. Lois has her little quirky, funny sense of humor. You know, like when we're running the press and everything's coming out the back, it's spitting it out. It's spitting it out.
Well, I thought it was supposed to do that, but apparently not.
Yeah, but
And
you know,
I'll say too, I mean, big props to Micah from ACT for kind of matchmaking the three of us together. I think as he was looking for programming for PVD Fest ideas, he kind of saw the through line in all of our work. And I've been a big admirer of Allie's work and Jacques' work for so long. So it makes sense to kind of see us all in the same space.